Alright, so this is the plug that comes with the Carolina Skiffs from the factory. It'll come with two of these ends, right, that fit this factory plug. This factory plug used to be mounted up there. The problem with these is that if you have a 80-pound 24-volt trolling motor like I have, and you use the proper 24-volt connector, I had a pretty good run. Mine lasted 2 years, but if you can see right there, it gets hot and it starts to melt. And it melted right there too. So my last trip, I used my trolling motor for quite a while on a high, which I don't normally have to do, but it was really high current and wind, and I was trying to troll along a shoreline. Long story short, when I got home, I went to unplug the trolling motor, and that was melted. So I had a good run, but it's definitely time to switch to the battery tender plug that everyone says is the best, and they claim is the best. So hopefully I won't have any more problems now that that's replaced. Alright, so what I did is I took this cutting board that I've used for a previous little project. It's just a thin, what is it, DPFE plastic. And I took the trim piece from the boat where the factory trolling motor plug was, and I've put it up here as a template. I drilled little pilot holes and then screwed that bracket onto my cutting board. So now I'm going to take that off, and I'll cut out the same piece out of the starboard / cutting board for the new battery tender trolling motor plug. So as you can see, to cut this out, I'm just using this Harbor Freight 10-inch saw, chop saw. So I'm just gonna line it up there, cut that out, and then I'll cut the other side, and then I'll sand it to smooth it out. There's one cut, and there is a second cut. So now I just gotta trim these corners down. I went ahead and knocked these three corners off. I just set them on here, got that close, chop those little corners off. This is an oscillating tool. I'm going to start with P60 sandpaper and just round out these edges, make it look factory and smooth. So there's the finished product before I drill the holes for the trolling motor mount, obviously, but it's duplicated that, so it should bolt up in the same holes that this was on the boat. So now I'm going to take the battery tender and drill a hole so that that'll mount on there. So now I just kind of marked out on there where I got to cut out in the center for that new trolling motor plug. So I'm going to drill the 4 corners and then cut that out. Alright, so this is the factory setup. All you got to do is take these 4 screws out of that plate that's normally on there, and then the wires will come out. Alright, so you got 4 wires, you got 2 negatives, 2 positives. Those normally hook into this. This is connected to that little trim piece. So this is the factory Carolina Skiff trolling motor plug that they put on there. So all you got to do is pull that plate off, and then disconnect the 4 cables from the back of this, and then disconnect this from that template. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep both sets of wires just so it's a higher gauge. I'm going to double up the 2 positives and the 2 negatives and just run those together and put those on these lugs. So I'm going to put both positives on this one, both negatives on this one, and that is the same as having a larger gauge wire, which you really honestly could just do the one. I think that this is 6 gauge wire, which is fine for that short run, but I don't see any point in not using both since I have them both there. So what I did have to do is these terminals are kind of small for this factory plug here. So I took these terminals and just drilled them out to a 1/4 inch. There's plenty of metal there. It should be fine. I just made the hole just a little bit bigger to where it will go on the stud like that. So I'll put both the negatives on the one side, both the positives on the other side. And then once that's bolted back on there, I will, well, I have to put the wires through this first. All right, then bolt them onto that bracket. And then once I bolt the new battery tender trolling motor plug on there, then I can shove the wires back in there, and that should screw back down like factory. So that's what I'm gonna do next. I did wind up drilling the center out. It's not pretty, but it doesn't have to be because this will cover it all up. So once that's mounted on there, it will look nice and flush. So just a quick note, when you go to install this part of the trolling motor plug onto here, don't forget to put the gasket. It's the gasket on the back and a plug for a water plug. So you put the gasket on, and then you can screw that down onto here before we wire it up to there. So that's how that looks once it's installed on there. Alright, so this is what it looks like after I've wired it to the back. So I've just got both the positive cables on the positive side, both the negative cables on the negative side, and then that harness will feed back in there, and this will bolt up just like the factory one did. And there you go. That's what it looks like once it's installed. Looks pretty darn factory. And what I'm going to do is get some 5200, some marine sealant, and just I'm going to pull it back out, put a little bead around the back side just so that's all waterproof. It's not necessary around this because it's got that rubber gasket, but I'll put a little 5200 on these screws on the threads so that's sealed, and then a little bead around the outside so that'll be completely waterproof all the way around. Alright, now with the trolling motor portion, so I still had my factory ring terminals on mine. A lot of guys have had them cut off, but anyway, all you need to do is have a ring terminal. If this thing will focus. You need a ring terminal that will fit on here. It's the trolling motor portion. Mine did not fit, so what I wound up doing was drilling that ring terminal out a little bit, and they are pretty small, and mine actually kind of ripped on the power side a little bit, but there's still enough material there where I'm gonna try it. I may come back in and replace it, which is really easy to do after the fact, but for now I'm gonna try drilling this one out too and install that on there. When you do this, don't forget to slide your 90 portion of the plug on there. It does come with a straight portion, which I was going to put on there, because I didn't think the 90 was going to work because it goes straight down. I didn't think there was enough room for the wires there, but so far it looks like there is. So I'm going to try the 90 because I think it'll help keep the water out a little bit better. See, this is what wound up happening with mine when I drilled it. And just when you do drill this, make sure you use pliers or something to hang on to here, because when that does grab, it will tear your finger up. Ask me how I found out. So just grab this with some pliers when you drill it out. Your best bet, guys, is just to replace these ring terminals with something bigger. That's what I would recommend instead of drilling these out. This is probably going to be temporary for me just to check it all out. But and I do have some bigger ones in my Harbor Freight kit, but the metal's so thin on them, I just don't really want to put those on. I don't think that's going to be good for the amp load, because even though the factory ones are smaller, the metal's a little bit thicker on it. So anyway, I'm going to attach this and then I'll show you what it looks like. That's the two wires bolted on, negative to negative, positive to positive. And then this 90 piece will slide up. There's the top portion of it right there. And then you got the little bracket piece there and the two screws. So I'll put that on and show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like after you're done installing it. Wires just come out the bottom, and that's the top, lugs. So now, pull that down, that plugs in there. Oh, sorry for the camera angle. That snaps in, just like that. So, for those wondering if the 90-degree will work, it does. It doesn't pinch the wires, there's plenty of room there. So, that's what it looks like. All hooked up. Don't mind my trolling motor sticking up. It's not really sitting on the puck all the way, but there you go. And just so you know, it comes with the kit. Alternatively, you could use this straight out version if you didn't like those wires sticking down. But I don't know. I don't really like how it's such a big opening where the wires come out. I feel like water could get down in there and pool up. So I think the 90-degree is a better option. Now, what you'll find on the other end, this is the trolling motor battery compartment. It's gonna have, this is your power lead that's connected to the terminal. It's connected to the terminal via this 40 amp breaker. All right. So it's got two of these, each on the power leads. One on this one on this one from the factory. Problem is, now that you're going to a traditional setup, a 40 amp breaker is not going to cut it. So I'm going to have to replace it with a 60 amp, because the 80 volt Tarova, it pulls like 56 amps, I believe, on high. So the 40 amp's not going to cut it. A 50 amp won't cut it. So I'm going to have to get a 60 amp breaker. And what I'll do with that is a 60 amp breaker will bolt these two ends, and then it will bolt to the battery positives. So this is the 40 amp breaker that came on the factory harness, and then I bought this Minn Kota 60 amp because now you've got one 60 amp breaker as opposed to two 40s. The 80 pound Tarova pulls like 56 max, so Minn Kota recommends a 60 amp breaker. So I purchased this on Amazon. It was like $40-ish, $36 I think. But you've got to have a 60 amp. A 40 won't do it, or a 50. And the highest you can get in that type is a 50. So gotta change it over to a 60 with the style. So what I did is I removed this from the part that bolts to the battery, and I'm going to cut these tabs off with the cutoff wheel, and then drill that hole out big enough to where, sorry, I got a mosquito in my ear, so where it will go on there. So there's that with the little tabs cut off the sides and drilled out to a 1/4 inch. So now, okay, slight change of plans. I wound up, I don't like this 90. It just doesn't work very well for the new breaker. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wind up cutting this edge off, but first thing I'm gonna do is just straighten this bracket out. The best thing you guys could do in this case is just buy one of the straight brass, or copper rather, brackets that you can get for those breakers, but I did not order one of those, so I'm using what I've got here. So I'll straighten that out and cut that tab off, and then show you what I'm gonna do with it. Alright, so this is where we wound up in the end. All I did was put that whole bracket with the bends in the vise, squeezed it down, straightened it out, and then once I got almost all of it out, I just hammered it right there. Got it all straight. So this is what I wound up with. Like I said, you can buy these in copper, and really stainless would work too, whatever, as long as it makes contact. This is just a bridge from the battery post right there, and it goes across to the post on the breaker. So you can buy one of these, or you can make it out of the factory connector for the breaker that came on the boat. Alright, so I just took the wire wheel to it, and that's the end result. So this is what you wind up with once you've got that bolted on. So now you can probably get a better understanding of what I was trying to accomplish. But like I said, you can buy these, and I think with the not the Minn Kota, what's the other brand? Anyway, one of the other name brand suppliers of these breakers, it actually comes with that. Oh, it's Motor Guide. Yeah, if you buy the Motor Guide version, I think it comes with a bridge like that. But I like to use what I have, and The reason I got the Minn Kota specific is there's so many of these breakers on Amazon that you can get for like 12, 13 bucks. And they got really bad reviews. They look the same, but people did tests on them and they've melted them down and they don't break at the right amperage. So my hopes are that getting one that came in a Minn Kota packaging and actually says Minn Kota on it, even though it's made in China, which I hate, I'm hoping it's actually decent quality and will protect the boat like it's supposed to. So that was my reasoning for spending the almost 40 bucks on a Minn Kota brand one, even though it looks identical, and it may be from the same exact suppliers as the ones they sell for 13 bucks on Amazon, but we'll see. Alright, so this is my setup in the battery compartment. Originally the two batteries, they came mounted in the center. I just moved them over a little bit so that I could mount my onboard battery charger over, but it's the same deal pretty much if they're in the center. You don't have to move them, but I would recommend an onboard charger. It makes things pretty nice. So that's my setup. But anyway, the power cables, they come out from in here. See my two powers. There's my two grounds. And then the way this is gonna work is this is positive and positive, negative, negative. All right, just make sure you get it lined up correctly. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to take and mount that just like that. So it sits perfectly on the motor, supports it. So I'm going to bolt that down, and then that gives me access to the breaker to reset it if it does happen to trip. And some people like to use the disconnect on it, or you could actually, instead of unplugging the trolling motor, you can just press that and use that as a disconnect. But I'll hook that up like that, and then I'll show you the rest of the wiring. This is what I've got. I've got positive off of one battery. This is just my charger, my onboard charger. It's bolted across to the battery side of the breaker. Then this is the load side of the breaker, and that's my two positives. They're just running between those two batteries, and then they're going to the back out up to that trolling motor plug. So now I've got to take crossover. This is the crossover, and I'm going to go from the negative of this same battery to the positive of this battery. It's just going to be in a diagonal from that negative across to this positive. And then the negative side of the trolling motor plug that's running again back up to the trolling motor plug will bolt to the negative of this battery. Alright, so that makes it 24 volts. So I'll bolt that all up and then I'll show you again. This is the finished wiring. You see I've got, this is battery charger, positive, to positive on one battery. Battery charger, negative to negative on same battery. Then go across to the other battery. Battery charger positive, battery charger negative. Okay. Positive, breaker, battery side of breaker. Load side of breaker goes to the positive going out to the trolling motor plug. Okay, that's just running between the battery out the back. Then from the negative of this battery, it crosses over via this red cable to the positive of this battery, and then the negative of this battery is hooked up to the negative cable going out to the negative on the trolling motor plug. And that's it. Everything is done. That should be the last of it. I'm about to, before I do anything else, I'm going to get the voltmeter out and then check at the plug and make sure it's 24 volts. So just to verify that it's all wired up properly. And we'll obviously have to engage the breaker before it'll read anything. Alright, so to test this, all you got to do is take your voltmeter. This is a fancy one, but all you got to do is make sure it's on volts DC. That would be volts AC on this particular meter. Volts DC. Alright, and then go to your trolling motor plug here, and it doesn't matter which way you do it. It's not going to hurt you, but you just hook to the two pros. So let's move this over here so we can get it all in the picture. Sorry, I'm trying to do this with one hand and hold the phone with the other. But it should be about 24. If the battery's fully charged, it may be more like 25 or so. Let's see if we can get that. Sorry, it's hard to do all this with one hand. There we go. 25.6 volts. There we go. Here goes nothing. There's the trolling motor. Put that in there. Stick it in. And hit test. See how the lights are up. And that should be good. So now we'll get the remote and check it the rest of the way. Well, I guess I can power it on. Yeah, there we go. So now the trolling motor's on, it's down, it's deployed. So, got your remote here. Turn it on. And we'll go all the way up to 10. Alright, so it's full power. Alright. Looks good. Now you could set it up and see how many amps it's actually drawing, but you have to do that in series, so you actually have to disconnect one of the connections to do so, which I'm not going to go and do right now. I'll run it on max power for a few minutes just to make sure nothing heats up. You know, I'll touch all the connections, see if anything's getting warm, and then I'll call it good from there and take it out on a water chest.